Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 5 a day, 5 minutes for a spiritual health check, 5 minutes to help us grow and develop as people during lockdown. Yesterday, we began a whirlwind-like look at the Beatitudes, Matthew 5. Matthew 5 to 7, we said, is this great podcast from Matthew of Jesus's teaching. Beatitudes, and I mentioned it's not beatitude. It's maybe a good way of thinking about it, but it's not beatitude. Well, here's a list of rules and regulations. If I follow this and take this on and be like this, I'll be okay. It's the opposite. What Jesus is teaching, you look at it and think, I can't live like that. That's not possible. Especially when you go on to some of the other teaching later on, and that's exactly it. These are actually attitudes that come out of an existing relationship with God. We can't become like this ourselves, but actually here's an attitude portrayed by the true disciples, true followers of Jesus, those who've come into relationship with God, and God changes and God works in their life. So let me read the first two. There are 8, and so we're going to try and do 2 a day over the next 4 days in just a few minutes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Luke said, blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. The poor in spirit are not people who lack courage, but the people who acknowledge their spiritual bankruptcy. Poverty itself doesn't elevate you. Poverty itself doesn't produce this attitude. But what we do know is that often when people are poor, when people are living through that, they realise that they can't rely on self. It produces an attitude of relying on God and trusting God, trusting others. It often produces that within people, that we know that often people living in those circumstances care and share in an incredible way. I've mentioned already, I think the other week, a statistic that, for example, in this country, the richest 20%, and you compare that to the poorest 20%, the poorest 20% give on average 3 times as much of the percentage of their income to other causes as the richest do. Why? Because they understand something of what it is to lack, but they understand something of what it is to share, and it produces an attitude, it produces a way of looking to God and caring for God. Jesus told us the story of 2 men who came to pray, and the first one, who was an upstanding member of the community, probably had titles after his name and people doffed their caps to him. Perhaps he was on TV all the time as a celebrity. Walks in there, stands in the middle of the church, of the temple, and prays to God. Says, God, I thank you. I'm not like other people, and I do this and I do that and do the other. Thank you. And then he walks out. Meanwhile, at the back, not even wanting to dare step into the building, there was a sinner who couldn't even stand, certainly didn't look up, but he knelt, and just where he was, on the threshold of the place, looked down and said, God, have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. So that's somebody who recognises his poverty in spirit. That's somebody who recognises where they are. It's one of those things that right now we're seeing across the world, the opportunity to meet needs, and actually often that's coming from the poorest. There's a certain arrogance often that comes with riches, and Jesus spoke about this. He said it's really almost impossible for rich people to get into the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because it builds a self-reliance, and I see it in so many people that I know and meet with at different levels, because they're got good education, because they're wealthy, because they can do this, they've got that and the other. There's an arrogance that puts them above other people. they feel themselves entitled and at a higher level and a natural looking down. And it happened in Jesus' day. Well, if you're poor, it's probably your fault. You probably messed about. You've not taken a chance. You've blah, blah, blah. That builds an arrogance. And Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for there's the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And that mourning is about weeping. Mourning is about weeping. And it's weeping over sin and recognising, like that man in the story that Jesus told, that actually I'm a sinner, that I'm not perfect. Having that poverty of spirit where you mourn. And actually it's great to see that while there are a lot of people, particularly if you're on social media, going on about what's happening in the world and attacking people, attacking this group or that group or other groups, but there are those who you can see are mourning and saying, we need to recognise who we are. We need to recognise our sins and the sins of our people and those around us. We recognise that, and that's the basis for living our lives and to moving on. Pretty quick. You can find out more. In fact, somewhere on our website, we've got a series of sermons that we did a couple of years ago on the Beatitudes, and that may be really worth you looking at. But I want you to think about these things. I want you to draw closer to Jesus and realise that it's through a relationship with him that real change happens. God bless you. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to being with you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.